On a knoll just west of Fort Collins, Colorado, sits a quiet, unmarked field. No signpost, no paved path, just earth and wind and stone. Bingham Hill Cemetery isn't found on many maps, and for decades it wasn't visited at all. Yet over 100 people are buried here. They came from many backgrounds: French-Canadian fur trappers, Oglala Sioux, Hispanic farmers, pioneer women, and infants who never had a chance to speak. This land was never meant to be a cemetery, but love and grief made it one, and now it asks to be remembered. In this episode, we'll explore the resting places of those that helped shape northern Colorado, and whose stories are still waiting quietly in the grass. This is not a ghost story. This is a memory story. I'm Aaron, and this is Stories in Stone. Just entering Bingham Hill Cemetery right now, coming from the south entrance. Just trying to figure out what this trail means. It's not really well marked, and we're going through this whole entire area without having really a direction of what we're going to. Sure exactly what we're going to. There's no markings of any kind, In the 1860s, long before any official deed existed, a man named John Baptiste Provost settled near this hill. He was a French-Canadian trapper, a veteran of the fur trade and the frontier. His wife, known as White Owl, was an Oglala Sioux. Together, they built a home, raised children, and weathered life on the plains. But they also buried two children on this hill, Basil in 1862 and Mary in 1865. These were among the first recorded burials in Larimer County. They didn't buy land in 1866, but when your child dies, you don't wait for paperwork. You find the highest ground and you bury your grief in the soil. The cemetery grew around that loss, informal, unfenced, unregulated. White Owl herself was buried here in Sioux tradition. It's said that her burial enclosure was remade by neighbors long after she passed. Bingham Hill wasn't founded just by settlers. It was built by a blended family, both native and European, laying their dead to rest under one sky. In a quiet corner of the cemetery stands a white marble obelisk. Over 7 feet tall, it towers above the other stones. At its base is a name, Ida B. Keller, and the words, "Not dead, but sleepeth." Ida died in 1882 at the age of 19. We know very little about her life, but her memorial became one of the most beautiful and iconic in this cemetery. Its carved book and Gothic lettering speak to the Victorian-era beliefs. The death wasn't the end, only a sleep before awakening. The stone was toppled by vandals in the 1990s twice. Once, a child even injured himself while they tried to push it. But it still stands, a tribute not just to Ida, but to the care of those that came after her, who lifted the monument again and again, so she would not lie forgotten. Not every story here comes from settlers' roots. In 1937, a child named Frederico Donald Vigil died at just 1 year old. His family, part of a tight-knit Hispanic community, believe his death was caused by ojo malo, or evil eye. A family member remembered seeing the shape of an eye in the yolk of an egg, a sure sign of this curse. His mother walked more than 10 miles with the sick child in her arms to reach the hospital, but he didn't survive. His grave, like so many here, has lost its original marker. But his story reminds us that folklore, love, and grief often overlap. That belief and tragedy can live side by side in the quietest of places. Originally known simply as LaPorte Cemetery or Bellevue Cemetery, this place was never called Bingham Hill Cemetery until long after burials took place here. No one ever paid for a burial plot here. No church or city ever claimed it. For over a century, Bingham Hill Cemetery existed out of sight and eventually out of access. In the 1980s and 90s, private landowners fenced it off. Volunteers could no longer mow. The path grew over. At one point, local officials claimed no record of the cemetery existed. Others tried to sell it. But bones don't disappear when the paperwork does. The land still holds the dead, quietly, persistently, and without permission. And today, it holds our attention again. Bingham Hill Cemetery is not grand, and it's not famous, but it is sacred. A father buried his children here. A community followed. And though stones broke, records vanished, and roads were closed, the stories endured. This was the beginning of Colorado's northern frontier, and these were its first families. Thank you for walking with me today. If you found meaning in this, please consider subscribing to Stories in Stone. There are many more quiet places waiting to be heard. Before I close this story, I want to acknowledge the book that made much of this video possible, History of the Bingham Hill Cemetery, written by Rose L. Brinks. Rose devoted tireless research to uncover the forgotten lives of the people that are buried here. While she was a teacher and writer by trade, her work on this cemetery seems to have been motivated not by profit or recognition, but by a deep desire to honor the people and history of this small community. In her own words, Rose reminds us, "It is not a morbid necrology, but a celebration of ordinary lives. None of the dead are just names any longer. My gift to them is that they now have a place, however sketchy, in printed history, and will not be forgotten." That sentiment is exactly why I began Stories in Stone, to ensure that cemeteries are not just places of loss, but places of memory and of beauty and human connection. I'll leave a link to her book in the description below, and I highly encourage you to explore it yourself. Rose Brinks had preserved these voices from the past, and it's thanks to her that we can still listen today.